Hello. Today I'll be reviewing the first 5 chapters of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I'm doing this as part of a YouTube series in which I'm reading the whole of the Harry Potter books for the very first time. So the first place to start when talking about this book is probably the front cover, because it's the thing that struck me the most about the book when reading the first few chapters. If you compare the front cover of this edition to the front cover of the first edition, I think the contrast is really striking. I remember I mentioned in my first video that I got the second book from my mum before I'd really read the first one. Well, I didn't read the first one at all, actually. And yeah, the front cover is just like it's Ron and Harry and Hedwig the owl in a car, a blue car. It looks like it's flying. I'll put a picture up. You can tell it's flying, but it doesn't really seem very magic-y to me. And it's like it's not Hogwarts. It's nothing to do with the castle or the houses, or it just didn't seem very magical. But when you see this front cover, I think it is so magical and so exciting and gripping. I'm going to show it to you. Looking at it here, like this phoenix, it looks like that's just beyond the grip of the mouth of the snake, or whatever that is. Maybe a leviathan. Harry ducking out of the way with a sword. He's got a sword? I didn't know he had a sword. I thought he had a wand. It's a really good front cover. I just noticed that the snake has some like a blood spurting from its eye. This is a wicked front cover. I think if you compare the moments depicted on both front covers, like the flying car is like they're in a flying car. It's chitty chitty bang bang. Great. They fly in a car. Whereas this one, it's a moment that you are looking forward to reading when you open the book, and you can't wait to get there. It feels very much like it's a moment at like the culmination of the action, and it just really draws you into reading the book and makes you more excited to read it. I will be really disappointed if this moment is not in the book and it's just randomly made up of magical elements. If Harry Potter does not get a sword in this book, I'm done. I'm done with the series. I'm not having it. Surely he does, right? Let's talk about the chapters that I've read, and we skip forward, but I've got another note here because I noticed when I was looking at the contents page, just before you get there are these notes about the Harry Potter series, and then it just says, also available in Latin, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Why is it available in Latin? And then, also available in Welsh, that's fine, Ancient Greek, and Irish. Irish is fine. Who's speaking Ancient Greek? Who's speaking Latin? It's a dead language. Unless they're using it to teach Latin in schools, in which case, okay. It's just curious. Oh dear, Latin. That's annoying. Oh, I know why it is now. I just thought why it's in Latin, because the spells are in Latin. This still doesn't make sense. But the spells are all in Latin, right? Let's see how many I can remember. 0. The light one, Lumos. Lumos? There's something Levioso. I'm doing really well. I'm doing excellently here. Big Harry Potter fan now. Expelliarmus. I just Expelliarmused my cup of tea. I'm so annoying. All the changes now. I need my phone for this bit. Okay, now I want to talk about the changes between the first edition and the 25th anniversary edition. It's a bit problematic to keep calling it the 25th anniversary edition because Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets can't be 25 years old. Only the first book can. Huh? So maybe it's the 24th anniversary edition. I don't know. I'm just going to call them all the 25th anniversary edition and be done with it. Okay? So, in Chapter 2, Dobby is hiccuping in Edition 1. And by Edition 25, he is hiccoughing. Maybe J.K. Rowling just decided that hiccuping was a bit too normal. Hiccoughing makes you feel like it's halfway between a hiccup and a cough, or maybe something more like what the little house elf would do. In the chapter where they're at the Weasleys' house, Fred gets punished twice, which is fun, in the first edition. he gets told to go and denome the garden, and then George and Fred get told to denome the garden, but Fred's already been told to denome the garden. So then in the 25th anniversary edition, it's changed to George and Ron, you two go and denome the garden as well, which makes more sense. And finally, at the shop called Borgin and Burke's, Mr. Borgin, the shopkeeper, puts a pair of pince-nez on his nose. I think I'm reading that right. In the first edition. And then in the 25th anniversary edition, he puts a pince-nez on his nose. Maybe it's technically a pince-nez, not a pair of pince-nez. That's all I noticed so far. Chapters. Chapter 1, The Worst Birthday. Harry's back at the Dursleys. There's been a few changes there and quite a few things happen. Dobby's warning. He meets Dobby for the first time. I believe that's a recurring character, certainly in this book, I think. Chapter 3, The Burrow, is the name of Ron Weasley's house, and all the Weasleys live there. Chapter 4, At Flourish and Blots. That's a shop. It's a bookshop. Wow, I'm remembering so well. And chapter 5, The Whomping Willow, is the tree that they crash the car into, and then it beats the car up because it's really angry. Hence, whomping. So before we go through all the chapters and see the bits that I found interesting about them, I wanted to talk a bit about just the general vibe of the beginning of this book, because J.K. Rowling is recapping a lot of what happened in the first book, which maybe if you read it when it first came out, you might appreciate that because you read the first book and you had to wait probably, I don't know how long, maybe a year. Should we say a year? Probably a year to read the next one. And then, you read it and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that bit. Oh yeah, that's good. But then when you can read the whole series, which you can and have been able to for many years, it's just a bit like, yeah, it's like watching a Netflix show and skip recap. Like I want to skip recap, but you can't you can, but then you'll miss out other things. So I thought that was a bit weird. I also felt like she was trying to allow you a point of entry on the second book, which clearly didn't work on me when I was a child, but because I just put it down and didn't read it until I was 35 years old now. So that was strange to me. But I can see why you'd want to do that. Video games do that. When there's a sequel to a video game, they often talk about how it's accessible to new players who haven't played the previous game. It feels like she's making this book accessible to new readers who didn't read the first book. So we'll start by talking about Dobby, who's a new character in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. He's a little house elf. He's quite odd. He hits himself in the head a lot and is quite self-harmy. Not self-harmy house elf. It's a bit strange. He reminds me of Gollum from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I suppose, because he's the way he speaks and the way that I don't trust him, and Harry seems to trust him because he's quite sympathetic to him. And I thought maybe J.K. Rowling might leave it up to the reader to make up their own opinions of him and not have any other opinions voiced on Dobby. But then Fred and George are very suspicious of Dobby when they're in the flying car. So that kind of makes me think that Dobby might actually be trustworthy, because usually authors would sort of leave it there and then bring it back as a surprise deception. We don't know who sent Dobby, which makes him quite interesting. We don't really know what his motivations are. It's left quite open-ended and quite mysterious part of the story. So, at least in the first 5 chapters. Intrigued to see where that goes. Next, I wanted to talk about Lucius Malfoy, who is this book's kind of baddie, I guess, from what I've read so far. He seems to be another agent of Voldemort, and he reminds me a lot of Professor Snape in the first book. He is Draco Malfoy's dad, so he's probably a Slytherin. And he just strikes me as, like I said, another agent of Voldemort. And what I noticed and what I thought about was that J.K. Rowling likes to put people between Harry and Voldemort as almost a bit, using another video game analogy, almost as like a mini-boss before you get to the final boss. I think what this really succeeds in doing, by putting people like little enemies and agents of Voldemort between Harry and Voldemort, it kind of helps to build up to a crescendo and builds this kind of malevolent mystique around Voldemort as we go through the books. You just, like, I can't wait to just have Harry versus Voldemort. That's going to be awesome. We haven't had that yet. We had it through Quirrell in the first book. Voldemort's kind of embodied there on the back of his head. Cool. But I want to see full strength Voldemort versus full strength Harry. And I know the series is going to deliver on that. But I think what's really cool is that we've had Snape, kind of, then Quirrell, and now it seems like Malfoy is going to be like the mini boss of this book, with sort of shades and overtones of Voldemort in the background again, and I'm totally okay with that. Like we've had, maybe, let's say in book 4 we've had 3 sort of agents of Voldemort who have been built up over the course of a book and then destroyed by Harry Potter. Harry Potter's getting stronger, but all the time in the background there's Voldemort waiting, and you're like, oh my gosh, the longer it takes to get to that final battle, the more it's going to be a sweet payoff, and I can't wait. So I really like how she's done that. In chapter 3, The Burrow, we hear mention for the first time, and probably not the last time, I hope not the last time, of memory charms, which I imagine are a type of spell. Based on the context, we've got Ron Weasley's dad talking about how they have to do memory charms on muggles who have seen magic happen. So they witness magic, they're muggles, so they shouldn't be witnessing magic. So the wizards who work with Ron Weasley's dad, what's his name? Arthur Weasley, they have to perform memory charms on people to get them to forget magic. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think this tells me a lot more about the world of Harry Potter, which, as you know, I've been struggling to come to terms with. I've sort of completely come around now to the idea that there aren't, in fact, 2 worlds, Muggle and Wizard, but they are one world, and they both exist in the same realm, in the same planet. And this memory charm, and the fact that we've seen Ron's house and how they live in the Muggle world, they kind of just hide magic amongst Muggles. And when it doesn't work, and when Muggles do discover magic, well, they've got memory charms, so they can go back and erase the memories of Muggles, which is quite sinister, actually. And really what I'm getting from this is a little bit of disappointment, because I think it's really far-fetched to imagine that wizards and witches live in the same world as Muggles, amongst Muggles, and just are doing magic, but just try and hide it. I don't really buy that. I like how worried Mrs. Weasley gets when she has heard about the flying car being used, and how Arthur used it, enchanted it so that it could fly, because she's worried about it being discovered and seen by Muggles. And it's a flying car, and they fly it in the early chapters, and it's just the idea that no one would have seen it. I know that it does get spotted actually later on, but I just think the whole idea is far-fetched. There's a bit where they're flinging garden gnomes out of the premises, and they're flying through the air, and just nobody's driving along seeing that. It just seems a bit far-fetched to me. Adding on to what I'm learning about the way the world works, and how the wizarding world and the Muggle world interact with each other and actually exist side by side. The whole platform thing, they can't go through the wall. I don't know why. That's fine. So then what they do is they decide. I mean, can we just talk about that as well? Like, sorry, you're going through this wall and you're just timing it so that no one in King's Cross Station is going to see you. It's one of the busiest stations in the world, maybe. And just, timing it. Okay, we're good. No one's watching. Through you go. That's a joke. Like, that's not going to work. So they can't go through. It locks them out. We don't know why. So they figure a way to get around that, is to go and jump in the flying car, and then follow the train. The train that no Muggle knows exists, that goes on a track out of King's Cross Station that no one knows exists. It's next to the other tracks. The idea that the track would just leads out of the station, and actually, if you follow it, you just get to Hogwarts. That's what this book is saying. It's preposterous. And they just fly. They go into a cloud. Maybe that's the moment where it's like, boom, now you're in the world where the train is. If they didn't fly in the cloud, they can still see the train. So they fly up in the car. They get spotted, don't they? So fine, okay, yeah. And they're flying, and they're like, where's the train? We've got to find the train. And then they fly into a cloud, and they come out the other side of the cloud, and then they can see the train. So is the cloud the portal? Have they unknowingly flown through a cloud portal into the Magic Land? Or is the cloud... It must be, because otherwise why would she even mention a cloud? They come out the other side of a cloud, and there, oh, we can see the train. Maybe they can only see the train because they're magic people. Like, the planes are flying, man. The planes are flying. They can just see the train too. There's a train there. They can see it. Planes are flying. They see the castle. Or can they not see the castle? It has been mentioned that Muggles can't see magic stuff. I can't remember where exactly, but in one of these books. But then I know they can because Hermione's mum and dad go to Diagon Alley. Alley. They see it. They're amongst it. They're okay, but it's just weird. Next, I want to touch on J.K. Rowling's writing style and some of the criticism that I know that she's received on her dialogue and how the dialogue tends to rely heavily on adverbs to describe the way that characters have said something. So there might be a piece of dialogue, and I've read one section where I noticed this. It jumped off the page at me, actually, where she was there were a few characters having a conversation, and it was something like, Harry said quietly, Dumbledore replied mysteriously, Hermione said quickly, and it's just quite, it's not jarring, but it's just a bit like, oh, it takes you out of it because you're noticing how many of these words end in ly, all of these adverbs over and over again. But then there's some brilliantly written dialogue as well. So the flying car with Fred, George, Ron, Harry in there, I think the dialogue's really good there. There isn't a heavy reliance on adverbs, and it's beautifully done. So I'm expecting to read more sections where it's like, oh, there's a lot of adverbs here again. And I wonder what the reason is for that. Is it because the days in which J.K. Rowling was writing the dialogue where it relies on adverbs, maybe those weren't very good writing days for her, but she just stuck with it and got through it. And then maybe the days where the writing is really good and the dialogue flows really nicely are the days where the sun was shining through the room, the birds were singing outside, and everything was good in her life. I don't know. I do think that the bits where it's adverb are objectively bad. It's not well written. Because, like I said, it takes you out of that part of the story and makes you notice the adverbs and think about the writing rather than being lost in the story, which is what I have been, apart from those sections and a couple of other bits here and there. So, interesting as well. There's been a few edits. I've talked about the changes between the editions and none of that has been addressed, so it's still seen as how she wants it to be, despite the criticism. That's interesting. For this next bit, we join Draco Malfoy, who's at Borgin and Burke's, the wizarding shop that Harry accidentally jumps into through the flue powder transport system. Draco is trying to convince his dad to buy him a broom, or talking about buying him a broom. His father says, I said I would buy you a racing broom, drumming his fingers on the counter. What's the good of that if I'm not in the house team, said Malfoy, looking sulky and bad-tempered. Harry Potter got a Nimbus 2000 last year, special permission from Dumbledore so he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead. The reason I want to touch on this is because I basically agree with everything that Malfoy's just said. Like, it isn't fair that Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall got him a Nimbus 2000. That's not fair. Dumbledore's in Gryffindor. He's the champion of Hogwarts. He's the leader of Hogwarts. He's the head teacher, headmaster, whatever. Head wizard. And he's clearly biased towards Gryffindor. Why is he in a house? He shouldn't be in a house. It's not fair. He did that thing in the first book where he's like, yo, winners are Slytherin. Well done. Oh, but wait. I've got a few more surprise points to give out that I forgot about. And actually, the winner's a Gryffindor. That's not okay. You can't do that. And then Draco's like, well, he gave Harry a Nimbus 2000, the best broom that you can have. And everyone's just like, yeah, cool. Good one, Harry. Because you survived the attack from Voldemort when you were 1 year old. 1 year old. It's gross. Dumbledore, least favourite character. Also, talking about the Nimbus 2000, why did they have to give it to him? I think it's just a bit over the top. And like, I completely agree with Draco Malfoy being annoyed about it. Like, how come he got the best broom from... I would hate him if I was at Hogwarts. I'd be well annoyed about that. And that's it for the first 5 chapters of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I'm really enjoying it so far. I like how long it took for us to get back to Hogwarts, but now we are back at Hogwarts. They smashed into the Whomping Willow in the car and they got whomped. The car got whomped by the Whomping Willow. And now they're there and they're going to do classes and see Hermione again and do all that good Hogwarts stuff. And I'm really excited to get back into it and see where we end up. See you in the next video. Bye.